Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear delegates to the 19th IISS Manama Dialogue. Let me begin by thanking His Royal Highness Prince Salman bin Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, the Crown Prince, the Deputy Supreme Commander and Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain, for a thought-provoking and excellent speech last night. The outcomes of the wars in Europe and the Middle East are likely to shape the global order for decades to come. The focus of this dialogue reflects the war in Israel and Palestine. The purpose of this dialogue, without seeking to assign to it too grandiose pretensions, it is to contribute in its own way to helping promote international peace and security. Very much in the spirit expressed so powerfully by His Royal Highness last night. I would like to thank His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa and the government of the Kingdom of Bahrain for their tireless support for this dialogue and for the IISS presence in the Middle East. The research team here at the IISS, at the office here in the Kingdom, in collaboration with colleagues from across all IISS offices, has produced a number of excellent studies on key issues of regional security, and I encourage you all to have a look if you haven't had a chance yet. We will now begin with our first plenary session. Let me remind everybody that these plenary sessions are on the record. This includes everybody who is asking a question, making a comment from the floor, so a degree of discipline is required from all. I will proceed by asking each of the speakers to give us their remarks from the podium in the order that they're listed in the program, and they will then return to their chair here on the panel. Once all of them have spoken, I will then take questions from the floor, and then we will finally come back to the panel to give everybody a chance to respond to those questions. To make this go smoothly as it can, let me point out the technical task that needs to be achieved. Every delegate in this room has a microphone. What you need to do to operate it is to put your badge, this badge here, into the microphone slot on the right-hand side of your microphone unit, and your name will then appear in front of you. And the second thing you need to do when you wish to take the floor, you press the microphone button. Your microphone will then turn green. That does not mean that it is on. I can turn your microphone on. You will appear here on the list of people who are seeking the floor, and I can turn your microphone on when I call on you, and then we'll move on to the next, and so on. So let us get to it. Sir John Chipman, Executive Chairman of the IISS, yesterday in his remarks suggested that strategy should be approached with a cool head and a warm heart. Let us see whether we can bring that approach to our first plenary session on war, diplomacy, and de-escalation, and it is a delight to ask the first speaker to take the floor, Ayman Safadi, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan. Sir, the floor is yours, and if I can invite you to deliver your remarks from the podium. Thank you, sir.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good morning to you all, and let me start by thanking our brothers in the Kingdom of Bahrain and IISS for convening this summit at a time when all of us have to speak loud and clear about the catastrophe that the Israeli war is bringing, not just on Gaza, but on the region in general. This is not a time for mincing of words. This is a time to state facts as they are. This is not self-defense. This is a blatant aggression, the victims of which are innocent Palestinians. Over 11,000 Palestinians have been killed thus far, the majority of whom are children. Almost 67% of them are children. The humanitarian catastrophe resulting from this is beyond words. People crowding UNRWA shelters have no access to food or water. We're looking at the high possibility of a breakout of disease with no sanitation facilities, no medicine, with 61% of health infrastructure destroyed. In those shelters, there's one unit shower for every 700 Palestinian. There is one toilet for 160 Palestinian. The food, the medicine that has been allowed into Gaza since October 21st is less than 10% of the needs of Gazans under normal circumstances. This war is not taking us anywhere but towards more conflict and more suffering and the threat of expanding into regional wars. Israel says it wants to wipe out Hamas. There's a lot of military people here. I just do not understand how this objective can be realized. We look at facts on the ground again. The facts on the ground that most of those killed are civilians. Gaza is one of the most densely populated places on earth. The shelling, the attacks on Gazans is again destroying whole communities. 1.65 million Palestinians have been displaced. In percentage terms, that's about displacing 275 million Americans. 275 million Americans are the equivalent in percentage terms of the Palestinians who have been displaced. They're being told to leave the north to go to the south. Yesterday, you all saw the news, the south is being bombarded. So basically the message, we're not gonna kill you in the north, we're gonna kill you in the south. This got to stop. There's nothing that can justify the continuation of this brutality because it's not bringing security to Israel, it's not bringing peace to the region. We all condemned the killing of Israeli civilians on October 7. And we said we do so consistent with our common humanity, with our values, with international law. Nobody could justify the killing of civilians. None. And if I may refer to a speech made by His Majesty in Cairo not too long ago. His Majesty referred to the Al-Uhda Al-Amariya, the Pact of Umar, where Muslim soldiers, 1,000 years before Geneva, were marching to war under the instructions of don't kill a woman, don't kill a child, don't kill an elderly, and don't even cut a tree. So killing civilians is not part of any culture, any religion, any faith. And we stand very clearly, unequivocally against that. But what Israel is doing now is killing civilians. And not only is it not condemning the killing of civilians, it is killing them. And that has got to stop again because that's not going to take us anywhere. I can go into giving you lots of facts, lots of details. They'll all will point to one thing only. There is a catastrophe happening, a flagrant aggression. It's got to stop for the sake of the Palestinians, for the sake of Israelis, for the sake of the whole region to be able to live in peace. And again, putting things in context is important. The conflict, as many of you have heard a lot of people saying, did not start on October 7. There's a history to that. For years, we've been warning against the absence of political horizon. For years, we've been warning that the blockage of any horizon towards solving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is going to drag us exactly into this moment. For years, we've been saying the fallacy of assuming that you can parachute over the Palestinian issue to create regional peace is wrong. It will only bring disaster. And here we are. Show me who's talking about any regional project at this point. Who's talking about integration? It's all about war. Because there is an occupation that has not ended, and there are no prospects of ending it. Gaza, I think you all can see what's happening in Gaza. However, there's very little attention being given to what's happening in the West Bank. Every day, there are 6 settlers' attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank. Every day. So far, over 200 Palestinians have been killed. The Armenian quarter in Jerusalem cannot be accused of being a Hamas hideout. Listen to what the Armenian community has been saying. 16th century existence is being threatened now by settlers who are going to that community, trying to destroying it, with the police watching and facilitating. And settlers are attacking Armenians with attack dogs day in, day out. Is this a war against Hamas? I think we've got to say facts as they are. This war has to stop and has to stop immediately. Civilians have a right to protection. Denial of food, medicine, fuel to Gazans is a war crime. We have to call it out as a war crime because it is. International law has to apply to all. The message that's being sent, given the fact that this war is continuing, Israel not listening to anybody despite the tremendous efforts that I know a lot of making, Israel is not abiding by international law. So what's the message here? Israel can do whatever it wants. That is the message that our people are seeing. That's what the whole world is seeing. Israel is above the law. General Assembly resolution calling it to allow humanitarian pauses. Did not listen. Security Council resolution, again, too late, but still a step in the right direction, urging Israel to stop for a humanitarian pause. It's not listening. Where do we go from here? And let me just be clear. Gaza alone, looking to the future, is not going to work. Looking at the conflict from a purely security prism, it's just going to make things worse. We've seen what that approach has done on the West Bank. So we will not entertain any idea of looking at Gaza alone. Let me be very clear. I know, speaking on behalf of Jordan, but having discussed this issue with almost all our Arab brethren, there'll be no Arab troops going to Gaza. None. We're not going to be seen as the enemy. And one very, very important thing, how could anybody talk about the future of Gaza when we do not know what kind of Gaza will be left once this aggression ends? So basically, by entertaining that, we're telling the Israeli government, do whatever you want. Go, destroy Gaza. Nobody is stopping you. And once you're done, we'll go clean your mess. No, we will not. If we want to talk about what should be done in Gaza in the future, we should stop the destruction of Gaza now. That is the message that we should all understand. The only way to move forward and secure the peace that has been a strategic choice for us. We've worked for decades for that. The Arab Peace Initiative goes back to 2002, where the offer was full peace, full normal ties and relations for ending occupation. It's not there. It has not been listened to. So we want strategic. We want peace as a strategic objective. We don't want our region to have to relive the horrors that are being imposed on it right now. But to do that, you're not going to be doing it by war. You're not going to do it by looking at Gaza, keeping Gaza as an open prison, besieged from every direction. The only way you do that is to end occupation, produce peace on the basis of the two-state solution that will allow all peoples of the region to live with dignity, to live with freedom, without the fear of being arrested at every corner or being shot at every turn. We've got to act, and we've got to act strong. Priorities for now, priority number one, stop this war. Stop this aggression, stop the killing of civilians, stop the killing of women and children. Priority number two, immediately allow for humanitarian supplies into Gaza. A whole population is being besieged, 2.3 million. How is this okay? It's just impossible to comprehend. Number three, once we do all of that, there's got to be an approach once and for all to end this conflict once and for all on the basis of the two-state solution that will fulfill the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to freedom and statehood and will address Israel's security concern. That is the only way to go forward. Other than that, we'll be living this scenario year in, year out, just like we've been for many decades before. What will Gaza produce after this? Israel says, again, it's want to wipe out Hamas. I said it before and I say it again. Hamas is an idea. You cannot bomb an idea out of existence. You're not happy with what Hamas is doing, convince the Palestinian people that they have a future and that Hamas is standing between them and that future. Thus far, that argument has not been made. Reality has not shown that. Palestinian people have been left with nothing left to lose. On the West Bank, in Gaza. Are we not going to learn? We're facing a major challenge here. Another victim of the war is the environment of peace that took a lot of hard work for us to get to it. How can you convince any Jordanian, any Egyptian, any Arab, anybody now that negotiations are really going to work and that we can engage in regional integration projects? So killing the faith in the viability of negotiations as a path to peace is one outcome of this ugly war. Another victim, credibility of international law. The selective application of international law. And I will say it again. If any other country in the world has done a fragment of what Israel did, will be sanctions imposed on it from every corner of the world now. The whole world is telling Israel, even those who recognize it is self-defense, we don't recognize that, let me be clear. This is not self-defense, it cannot be justified as self-defense. But those who accept that are telling Israel to act within the realm of international law. It's not. So where do we go from there? Keep telling them to do it, they keep refusing to do it. What happens? People are being killed day in, day out. And then we're supposed to come and clean the mess after Israel. That's not going to happen. At least that's our position. What we want to do, what the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan wants to do with all our friends and partners, is to, once this war ends, once the suffering ends, to again look at how we can all work together, once and for all solve this conflict, and that conflict can only be solved if occupation ends and the rights of Palestinians to freedom are realized and statehood, and the rights of Israel to security are addressed. And that's why we're looking to work with all our partners. The US has a leading role to play in this effort. Nothing will move without a US leadership role, let's be honest about it, in terms of making the peace. We need our friends in Europe, and we in the region need to do our part. However, there are so many variables that we don't know as of yet. We don't know, again, what kind of Gaza will be left once this war ends. We don't know what kind of a political orientation is going to be prevailing within the Israeli government. And before I close, just one thing. What's happening now, the displacement of people, is consistent with what sitting Israeli ministers have been saying for years. Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, religious Zionism, parties, they've all for years been saying the only way to move forward is to kick the Palestinians out of their ancestral land and wipe the Palestinians out of the face of the earth. When it comes, just one little side, when it comes to displacement, I think we made our position very clear in Jordan. I think our brothers in Egypt have made that same position as well, very, very clear. We will never allow that to happen. In addition to it being a war crime that will be a direct threat to our national security, we'll do whatever it takes to stop it. I just want to close again by just one last sentence. I'm sorry if I took more time. I didn't have a watch to look at it. But I'll just say one thing. The priority now, before we talk about what's going to be done next, we have to stop this war. We have to stop the killing. And again, we need all to come together to produce the peace that we believe is the only path to ensuring security for Palestinians, for Israelis. Our position is every life matters, Palestinian, Israeli. We should do everything we can to stop the horrors that we see unfolding from happening again. The path to that is a just and lasting peace on the basis of the two-state solution. We stand ready to work with all our partners to make sure that this is achieved. Thank you so much.
Minister, thank you very much for the clarity of your position. If I may now invite our next speaker to take the floor, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Walid Al-Khareji. Please, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء. أصحاب السمو والمعالي.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum. Be the blessings of God be with you. I would like first of all to thank the Kingdom of Bahrain for the efforts that they have paid in organizing this forum and for its success, for their good hospitality. I would like as well to thank Dr. John Chipman, the Chief Executive of the IISS. It is a pleasure to be with you today, and I convey to you the salutations of the Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and his wishes for the success of this event. Ladies and gentlemen, the Manama dialogue has always had a huge importance because it has enabled dialogue that highlights the most important issues related to regional security and to finding sustainable solutions. The title of this conference, which is War, Diplomacy and De-escalation, has a very important influence on what we need to do. In fact, this session of the Manama dialogue is taking place within this very important crisis that is touching this area. We are facing horrific crimes that are violating the international law. We are witnessing military aggressions leading to thousands of victims, a war that nobody will be gaining of, and the region will not, of course, get out of this without huge repercussions. In Palestine today, we are facing horrific events, barbaric violations against civilians, unarmed civilians, because of the huge escalation of the occupation forces of Israel and their violation of their national laws and humanitarian values, disregarding the international calls, and they are bombarding vital facilities, neighborhoods full with civilians, hospitals, and different other civil facilities. We have always repeated that the civilians should not be attacked under no pretext. We have condemned the policy of forced displacement and mass sanctioning that is followed by Israel and the embargo against the Palestinian population. Such a war that is prolonged will be leading to a humanitarian crisis, an unjustified one that will be leading the region to a huge crisis, destabilizing the regional security and removing all possibility of peace. In fact, this crisis, since the start of this crisis, we have worked with all the allies and partners to mobilize the international community for it to play its role and to put an end to these repeated violations and to the cycle of violence, for the Palestinian population to be able to enjoy their least legitimate rights. But in fact, the latest events push us to really think of how to find a solution. In fact, the kingdom is calling upon the United Nations to impose a truce, a humanitarian pause, or a humanitarian truce as a first step that needs to be followed by a de-escalation and holding the Israeli Defense Forces accountable for what they have done and to work towards peace in the region. But in return, and thanks to the extraordinary common International Islamic Summit that is held in Riyadh, we are working towards a unified Islamic voice that would support the Palestinian population towards a just and sustainable peace in this region. In fact, the kingdom has worked in order to put an end to this slaughter and to find some solutions to get out of this crisis. We will go on mobilizing all these efforts in order to convey our message, to convey our priorities to the entire world, to reach an immediate ceasefire, to remove the blockades or the siege on Gaza, and to open the way for medical and humanitarian assistance, releasing the hostages and the detainees, and reviving the efforts of durable and fair peace, in fact, and comprehensive peace. In fact, this is reminding us of having to go again to a peace process that would give back the Palestinians their legitimate rights, for them to establish their state upon the borders of 1967, with East Jerusalem as their capital, based on the international resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. This is the only way to put an end to this conflict and to find a better future for the entire region, to live peace, stability, and security. Majesties, Highnesses, ladies and gentlemen, we are facing this huge responsibility that is caused by this crisis and many others in this area, and to reduce these tensions that we are living, these tensions that are only leading to wars and destruction. And everybody knows the importance of this region and its vitality for the economy, international economy and trade. This means that security and peace in this region will have their repercussions beyond this region, or their crises and their conflicts will of course reverberate all over the world. In fact, such conflicts will have ramifications, namely adding and increasing violence and extremism, and having a fertile ground for more terrorism. Consequently, it is very important to work on solving these problems and treating them in a collective way by strengthening the international organizations for them to be able to put an end to the ramifications. At the end, I would like to reiterate the importance of an immediate ceasefire, stopping to killing the civilians and putting an end to this conflict in Palestine. We would like to call upon the international community to put an end to this war, to achieve the peace we are looking for a better future in this region that needs to live in security, peace, and prosperity. Assalamu alaikum. May the peace of God be with you.
Minister, thank you very much for your remarks. May I now invite Brett McGurk to take to the podium, the coordinator for the Middle East and North Africa in the U.S. National Security Council. Brett.
Thank you so much, Bastian. I want to thank His Highness King Hamad, Crown Prince Salman, the hospitality of the Bahraini people, and IISS, Sir John, for bringing us together at this important and extremely difficult moment. When I stood on this stage 1 year ago, I discussed the pillars of President Biden's policies in this region. The pillars being partnerships, diplomacy, de-escalation, deterrence, integration, and values. And these 5 principles have guided our approach to this region, from ending the war in Yemen to confronting Iranian aggression to setting the foundation ultimately for a more integrated, stable, peaceful, and prosperous region. They've also, frankly, guided our approach to the current crisis in Gaza, one that threatens to upend this more hopeful vision. In fact, it was partially the intent of Hamas and others on October 7th to upend a future of stability, integration, and peace, and they will not succeed. Since the earliest hours of October 7th, the United States of America has been focused on supporting our partners in this region and containing the conflict to Gaza, to Hamas, the terrorist group that started this, by slaughtering more than 1,000 people from over 30 countries, including 35 Americans, the worst violence against Jews since the Holocaust, taking hostage more than 200 innocent people, including toddlers, even babies, and their mothers. President Biden has made a dozen calls or so to Prime Minister Netanyahu, spoken regularly to regional leaders almost every day. I was on a call last night with him and the Emir of Qatar, to European G7 counterparts and others, again on a near daily basis. He visited Israel about a week after the crisis, the first wartime visit by a president to Israel in history. And all of us have been working tirelessly with counterparts, including those on this stage, to facilitate humanitarian assistance to those in need, secure the release of hostages, and it's important what the Crown Prince said last night, and I will repeat it in my remarks, which will lead to a sustained multi-day humanitarian pause and to begin setting conditions for the longer term. In longer term, there's no returning to October 6th. That's true for Israel, it's true for Palestinians. No country can live with the threats of terror like what we saw from Hamas unleashed on October 7th on their border. And at the same time, Palestinians deserve, need, and require safety and self-determination. As President Biden has said repeatedly, there is no durable way out of this crisis long-term, except one that results ultimately in an Israel that is fully secure and the establishment of a Palestinian state. And that might seem impossible now, but it's not. And in fact, in the days before October 7th, we were engaged in intensive discussions with Saudi Arabia and Israel about the prospect for normalization between those two countries. With the Palestinians both a partner and at the center of the developing package deal, a transformative deal for the region, for the world, and for the Palestinians in the West Bank. This was not an end run around that issue. Quite the opposite. There would be no deal, as our Saudi friends have said, without that Palestinian component. And in this case, what was true before October 7th is even truer now. That central issue must be addressed, and as Hamas is degraded, we are determined to help address it. So allow me to speak to what we are doing right now, including literally at this very hour, and then look ahead beyond the crisis to where we aim to lead. Our immediate focus is on regional security, securing the release of hostages, including through humanitarian pauses, containing the conflict, and surging humanitarian assistance. Let me first focus on regional security, including Israel's security. The United States of America supports its friends, particularly when threatened or attacked. And in this case, our support when it comes to Israel's security is not just focused on threats from Hamas. It is not just Hamas. It is also, by necessity, focused on other threats, including Hezbollah, other terrorist groups backed by Iran, and Iran itself. And now, while supporting Israel in its defense, we have also been clear that Israel must comply with international humanitarian law, work to separate Hamas from the Palestinian population, even as Hamas embeds itself within that population, and I want to stress the difficulty of this challenge. In his public remarks in Tel Aviv, President Biden reflected on his own experience making wartime decisions. He said, "There are never clear choices. There are always costs. Leaders must be deliberate, ask hard questions, defining objectives and making ongoing, honest assessments about whether the path you're on will achieve them, continuous and ongoing. We will not tell another country how to grieve or how to protect itself, but as friends and partners, we will do our best and offer our best advice and counsel, an ongoing rigorous inquiry on how to achieve shared objectives for peace and security. This approach has guided our engagement with the Israelis on a daily basis, direct conversations about its objectives, whether they are being achieved, and at what cost. And we keep those discussions private, including where we agree and particularly where we disagree. But we have to keep in mind, and we do, that Hamas started this war. Hamas is living underground in tunnels, underneath civilian infrastructure, and underneath civilians. It's pledged since October 7th to repeat October 7th again and again. It's holding children as hostage, now going on 5 weeks. And in the words of its own leaders, there is no regard, it has no regard for the people of Gaza, the innocent lives now caught up in this war. If Hamas wanted to protect the people of Gaza, it could release the hostages, surrender the leaders and those responsible for October 7th. Let me turn to that, briefly to the hostages. And it was very important, I thought, what His Royal Highness said last night. The United States continues to work on efforts to reunite hostages held by Hamas with their families where they belong. It's a top priority for the President, who has spoken with families of U.S. citizens who are still being held. He spoke to the issue 3 nights ago with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and as I mentioned just last night, with the Emir of Qatar. I will not discuss the details of those discussions here, but they have been intensive and ongoing. The track we have pursued led to the release of 2 Americans, a mother and a daughter, which was a pilot for what we hope will be a much larger release. Now, such a release of large number of hostages would result and a significant pause in fighting. A significant pause in fighting. And a massive surge of humanitarian relief. Hundreds and hundreds of trucks on a sustained basis entering Gaza from Egypt. And I have to say, Hamas from the earliest days has said, if you want the hostages returned, we need fuel, more humanitarian supplies. That's the bargain they set. But this is the pathway to a pause in the fighting, the release of hostages. And it's also reasonable to pause the fighting, release the hostages, the women, the children, the toddlers, the babies, all of them. And the onus here is on Hamas. This is the path. Simply calling for a ceasefire is not a path to peace. Imagine if someone took your family members and then told you to get them back, you had to give them X, Y, and Z, whatever it might be, and you were being advised, just give them X, Y, and Z anyway, without any promise that your family members would be released. That would be problematic. And that's where we've been. And yet we have been working to get humanitarian aid into Gaza, increasingly. But the surge in humanitarian relief, the surge in fuel, the pause in fighting will come when hostages are released. Speaking of humanitarian relief, we are working to significantly increase assistance into Gaza. And everybody working on this feels the pain and the emotion that Ayman laid out. Everyone, every day. It is horrific. It is intolerable, as the Crown Prince said yesterday. And we are leading efforts to increase the flow of life-saving, sustained humanitarian assistance. At the beginning of the crisis, of course, there were no border crossings into Gaza, and it was through our engagements that humanitarian aid began to transit through Rafah from Egypt. President Biden's visit to Israel opened the door to assistance. His direct conversations with President Sisi finalized the deal to finally get trucks moving from Egypt into Gaza. David Satterfield, our humanitarian coordinator on the ground, I just saw him the other day in Israel, working every day to surge as much support as possible. There are now approximately 100 trucks a day entering Gaza loaded with assistance, but it is not enough. Nobody says it's enough. And we aim to double that amount as soon as possible and then see it grow exponentially from there. But I want to just stress, the hostages are released, you will see a significant change. We have also committed $100 million for these efforts. We have a $14 billion supplemental package before the Congress, which is indeed focused on defense needs for Israel against the myriad of threats it faces, but also a significant portion for humanitarian assistance for Palestinians and the people of Gaza. This has been matched by $100 million from the GCC, $100 million from the EU, which is welcome. And the United States is the largest supporter of UNRWA. Support the Biden administration restored 2 years ago after it was cut entirely by the last administration, and UNRWA remains the only reliable distribution network in Gaza. There's no alternative, and this vital support from us will continue, and we call on others who express concern about the situation to do the same. Let me talk about containing the conflict to Gaza and to Hamas. The president has said clearly, repeatedly, to any country, any organization, anyone thinking of taking advantage of this situation, don't. We're now 5 weeks into this conflict, and the fears of the expanding conflict from the earliest days so far have not materialized. And at this conference last year, you heard myself and other American speakers speak about integrated air defense networks. Those networks were being established. The concept of dynamic force deployment, which a year ago was a concept in our national defense strategy. Ensuring that the United States can respond here in this region on a moment's notice, even without standing fixed forces in the hundreds of thousands as we used to have. And recent weeks have proved the case. Integrated air defense networks developed over years of painstaking work through CENTCOM and our partners throughout this region have destroyed dozens of missiles and UAVs, including missiles launched from Yemen, destroyed on the edge of outer space. The Forward Carrier Strike Group, led by the largest aircraft carrier in the world, with an embarked air wing accompanied by cruisers and destroyers, is now in the Gulf, with another carrier strike group, the Eisenhower, anchored in the Eastern Med. We've moved additional air defense, air assets, to supplement the defenses we've already had. The intent here is not to escalate the situation, but precisely the opposite, to deter and to prevent, while also being fully prepared for whatever may come, particularly to defend our personnel and interests, and prepared we are. Let me turn finally to a look ahead, to what can come after the crisis. And I don't necessarily agree that until the fighting stops entirely, we really can't focus on these fundamental questions. It's important, I think, to ask how we can work together now to ensure, against the desired and stated wishes of Hamas, that this can never, ever happen again. And this will require significant security reassurance for Israel. That is fundamental. And it will require a new and reinvigorated process for a long-term and durable peace. And we frame our diplomacy with that in mind. I hearken back again last night to the Crown Prince's remarks, because he referenced, very importantly, Secretary Blinken's comments in Tokyo at the G7, where he set forth principles that guide our approach. They've become known as the Tokyo Principles. That was not the intent, but I think that's a good way to phrase them. In the near term, the United States insists and will work to ensure the following with respect to Gaza. First, there must be no forcible displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. Second, there must be no reoccupation of Gaza. Third, there must be no reduction of the territory of Gaza. This is Palestinian land, and it must remain Palestinian land. Fourth, Gaza must not be used as a platform for terrorism or other violent acts. That means no threats to Israel from Gaza. Finally, there must be no besiegement of Gaza. The innocent people of Gaza must be separated from Hamas. They are not responsible for its crimes. For the medium and longer term, even in the midst of this crisis, we must plan now and prepare now. Not tomorrow or when the fighting stops, but right now. So our 5 no's: no forced displacement, no reoccupation, no reduction in territory, no threats to Israel, no besiegement, followed by 5 affirmative and forward-looking principles. First, the Palestinian people and their voices and aspirations must be at the center of post-crisis governance in Gaza. Second, the West Bank and Gaza must return to unified governance, ultimately under a revitalized Palestinian Authority, and be incorporated into a future Palestinian state, an impediment which has been in place since 2006. We need to overcome that, and I think we can. Third, Israel must be secure. Terrorist groups and threats to Israel cannot be permitted to emanate and metastasize from the West Bank or from Gaza. I do agree with Ayman. There's a significant role here for Israel when it comes to the West Bank, something we've been speaking very directly to and very publicly to. Fourth, resources must be provided, and we must prepare now to support the post-crisis phase in Gaza, to include interim security resources as necessary within the paradigm that we've laid out. It is not simply about cleaning up after the war. It is about setting the foundation for the path that we just laid out, ultimately a path to 2 states. Fifth, a reconstruction mechanism must be established to ensure the needs of Gazans are met on a long-term and sustainable basis. We have done this before. As a global community, we can do it again. And if we seek to forge a path out of this crisis towards Israelis and Palestinians ultimately living side by side in 2 states, with equal measures of security, freedom, opportunity, and dignity, these principles are essential. And even where we might disagree on the immediate term, we can help guide all of us as we seek to forge the way out of this crisis and towards a better future, a Middle East at peace, increasingly integrated, stable, prosperous, and secure. And I'll just conclude with an observation. I think it's fair to say, when you come to this conference every year, that those in this room who attend every year, IISS, my colleagues on this panel, I think it's fair to say you're the builders. You seek a different way to build new connections, a better future for all of us, and particularly for this most important region. Hamas, ISIS, the Iranian-backed militias launching missiles and drones every other year or so, that is a main focus, one of them. They're the destroyers. They offer nothing for the people they claim to represent. I just have to 2 seconds here. It's important, because this is how we see this. But President Biden is a builder. He's a builder at home. with historic investments in our own growth and infrastructure and abroad with our friends, partners, and allies. And over the years alone in this region, the last year, we have built coalitions, increased shared prosperity. The India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor announced at the G20 in New Delhi, the CCEPA agreement with Bahrain, historic agreements here in the Gulf in the areas of advanced tech, artificial technology, space exploration, climate, clean energy, global investments in ports, essential minerals, resources that will define the future. That remains our affirmative agenda, building a new Middle East integrated within the region and from the region outwards to the world. But out of this crisis, importantly, we are determined to build lasting security for Israel and a durable, real peace between Israelis and Palestinians. It's not only possible, but it's essential. And I think this crisis is a galvanizing event that can actually get us there. And we as the United States are fully prepared, as Ayman said, to do our part. And we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement and for outlining.
شكرا.
May I now ask the EU's High Representative for Foreign Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission, Josep Borrell, to take the floor. And while he is making his way to the podium, just a reminder, do insert your badge if you're seeking the floor. We started the session a little bit late because of previous commitments from some of the speakers, so we'll take a little bit of the time of the coffee break to answer questions.
Thank you.
Borrell.
Thank you. Let me first thank you for your invitation. The Manama Forum is the place to be here, in particular in these challenging times. Happy to be here in Bahrain, which means between two seas, and this goes beyond geography. Bahrain is a country between different forces, different traditions, a country that plays a moderating role in this region, a role that is much needed and much appreciated in this time of extreme polarization, because the rise of emotional polarization and the gap between peoples and governments is one of the most important challenges of our time. A country that is a beacon in the region and in the world. So thank you very much to the Manama Forum and to the authorities of Bahrain for hosting us. I want to pay tribute to His Excellency, the Crown Prince of Bahrain, who took a bold step beyond the official position of Arab partners last night, condemning both sides of the conflict, Hamas and Israel, for what has resulted a tremendous loss of human lives, livelihood, and hope on a better future. We have to move from war to peace, to de-escalation. And for that we have diplomacy. Diplomacy is the tool, the most valuable instrument. But we are far from getting results. I'm trying to talk with my mind and my heart also, because I'm coming from Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Ramallah. And one has to be able to say the same things everywhere. It would be easy here to get your applause. But if my words have to have meaning, they have to be the same when I am talking to the Israelis face to face, when I am talking to the families of the people being kidnapped, when I am talking to the victims, the families of the victims in the kibbutz, and when I am thinking on the families of the people being killed in Gaza. I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy to represent here the European Union. Last year it was much easier. It was just necessary to blame Iran to get you being applauded. Today, is it going to be a little bit more difficult? I know. But I will face this challenge, honestly. And I think that there are two dimensions. First, humanitarian, or if you want to call it, the way the war is being conducted by Israel in Gaza. And from this point of view, I am fully agreeing with you, Minister Safadi, on the data that you have been provided about the number of casualties. I am not going to repeat them. The suffering of civilian populations will only increase if we are not able to stop this. And we are working on this. We have increased our humanitarian aid, and certainly we have to do more. But it doesn't make any sense to give me a dinner tonight if you are going to kill me tomorrow. So yes, humanitarian support is needed, but what is more needed is to stop the causes that humanitarian need is needed. And the second one is the political stage. In Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, I met the United Nations agencies. They painted a dire picture. They know how the situation is running in Gaza. And when you go and you visit the kibbutz and you see what's happening there, you can only think one thing. One horror doesn't justify another horror. And after the humanitarian stage, there will be unavoidably a political stage. And the end game is well known. It's the two-state solution. However, I hesitate to talk about it. Not because I don't believe in it, because I don't see any other solution. I hesitate because we have been repeating once and again for 30 years two-state solutions. Since Oslo time, 30 years ago. Two-state solution, two-state solution, two-state solution, and doing nothing, or almost nothing, to implement it. And I think that on repeating and repeating two-state solution while doing nothing to implement it, we have been given tactical coverage to the strategy of expanding settlers in the West Bank. In Oslo time, there were X, now there are 4 times X, 4 times more settlers. And the Palestinian territory has been reduced to an archipelago of small pieces of land not interconnected among them, which makes much more difficult the two-state solution that we are preaching. That's why 6 months ago, I just started working with Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, and the Arab League in a very, very enthusiastic way to try to revive this process, to take that in the center of the stage, because it's a fallacy that we could solve the problem in the region just by making agreements between the Arab states and the State of Israel, forgetting about the Palestinians. They are there, and they have to be taken into account, and there has to be also peace between Israel and Palestine. Otherwise, it will not be peace or no security in the region and in the world. And I think that the Europeans and the Arabs have a particular responsibility to engage more on looking for a solution. However, what saddened me is that this mantra that has been repeated once and again, maybe it was a way of washing our hands and keep them clear. And we have never delivered it. Therefore, talking about the two-state solution without defining the progressive and provisional steps to get there, which can one day lead to it, is not useful. And this is an occasion, maybe it's a wake-up call for the international community in order to take that seriously. And that's why I've been talking about some way of getting out of that, which I was in Tokyo also, discussing with my friend Secretary Blinken and others. And certainly, there are some red lines that we have to define. And these red lines are no reoccupation of the forced displacement of population. Well, but when you say forced displacement of population, think about it. If you are being bombed and starved, you will displace. This is forced displacement of population. We mean not forced displacement of population out of Gaza, because Gaza is a Palestinian territory that should remain a Palestinian territory. So no separation of the territory of Gaza from the West Bank and East Jerusalem. There are no 3 Palestinian territories. There are 1 Palestinian territory. So no reduction of the territory of Gaza. Certainly not return to the status quo. No more terrorist attacks can be launched from Gaza against Israel. And this means that Hamas cannot be in control of Gaza any longer. So who will be in control of Gaza? I think only one could do that, the Palestinian Authority. I was in Ramallah. They told me that they are ready and willing to take this responsibility. In fact, right now, the schools, the hospitals, the public services in Gaza are being run by the Palestinian Authority. They are paying for it, and there are tens of thousands of staff people from the Palestinian Authority serving the people in Gaza. But they will need international support. It's not a matter of replacing them, it's a matter of supporting and helping them. And this will require a strong involvement of the Arab countries in the economic and political reconstruction of Gaza, not only the physical reconstruction of Gaza. I was in Gaza in 2008, after the first bombing of the city. And since then, we have reconstructed Gaza physically 4 times. It's not a matter of rebuilding the buildings. It's a matter of building a state, a statehood. And the Arab countries need to take their political responsibilities, particularly those among you that have a good relation with Israel and also being trusted by the Palestinian Authority. I think that Egypt and Jordan have a crucial role to play now, but also Saudi Arabia and all of you. And finally, we, the European Union, we too, we have to engage more on looking for a solution. We all need peace between Israelis and Palestinians more than ever, because never has the polarization between the North and the South and within our societies as much alarming as it is today. Thousands of anti-Semitic acts are being deployed in the Western societies. This has to be fight. Yes, Israel deserves security, and the Palestinians deserve dignity. Yes, Israel deserves security, and the Palestinians in the West Bank too deserve security. More than 400 of them has been killed since the beginning of the year. So I said clearly in the kibbutz, I said clearly in Ramallah, everywhere, one horror doesn't justify another. And enduring peace and security cannot be delivered without a political process. People have not responsibilities for the crimes that were committed in the kibbutz, don't have to pay for it. Peace has never seemed too far away. But maybe this is an opportunity that we cannot miss. As my friend Shimon Peres told me once, war is not inevitable. Peace is inevitable. And as a European, I can attest you that this is true. Peace is possible. The only question is, how many innocent lives will need to be lost until we get this realization? This lies in our hand. Let's work for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, High Representative. Thank you very much. We will go straight into questions. I'll take a group of 8 or so to collect a number of points, and then we will return to the panel for a final round of answers. And the first on my list is Mina Al-Oraibi from the UAE. Your microphone is on now.
Thank you very much. My question is to Mr. Brett McGurk. Do you believe Israel should heed to the UN Security Council resolution that was just passed and to the UN General Assembly resolution also?
Thank you very much. And the next on my list is one of our young leader delegates, Sheikh Sabah Al-Sabah from Kuwait. Your microphone is on.
Thank you. My question as well is to Mr. McGurk. You were a special envoy for the global coalition to counter ISIL. You built a formal alliance of 62 nations that was formed to support Iraq under Prime Minister Abadi to fight ISIL along 5 military and diplomatic lines of effort. Indeed, a multinational formation, the Combined Joint Task Force, OIR, which was in my country, Kuwait, was stood up to degrade and destroy ISIS in Iraq, Syria, and Libya. As we're seeing the increasing conflation of Hamas with ISIS, as many Israelis promulgate the hashtag Hamas is ISIS, indeed, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, Hamas is ISIS and ISIS is Hamas. Your remarks just a few moments ago, you mentioned Hamas and ISIS in the same breath, saying every year it's one or the other. My question is, given this, will you seek to build a similar coalition to combat Hamas and stand up a similar combined joint task force? If so, how do you think the membership will look like and how successful will it be? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next on my list, Hassan Al-Hassan from Bahrain at the IISS.
Thank you very much. I have two questions for Mr. McGurk. The first one is to seek clarification on the U.S. position. Is it the case that the U.S. does not support a multi-day pause in the fighting unless and until Hamas releases all of the hostages in its custody? Is that the U.S. case? Is that the U.S. position at the moment? And my second question pertains to Iran. So the Islamic resistance in Iraq, quote unquote, according to the Institute for the Study of War, has claimed 81 attacks against U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria since October 7. The U.S., according to press reports, has conducted 3 rounds of retaliatory strikes. Do you agree with the assessment that U.S. deterrence of Iran below the threshold of open war has all but failed? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's try and limit it to one question each, please, so that we can bring as many people in as possible. Ragida Derham from the U.S.
Yes, sorry, but again, it's to Brett McGurk. Hello, Brett. Do you believe, obviously, that your deterrence worked with Iran and Hezbollah because there has been no expansion of the war and because you see the positions of, the stated positions of Iranians saying we are not going to engage together with Hamas in this war? What guarantees you have that this is not only transitional? You use the carrot and the stick approach. Can you tell us a bit about the carrots? We saw the stick, but we want to know more about the carrots. And are you willing to use your leverage with the Israelis, Brett, in order to make sure that they don't drag the United States intentionally into a wider war because it may be an opportunity, a political opportunity for them? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom Beckett from the UK.
It's really a question for Joseph Borrell and raised by Ayman Safadi about sanctions. Brett McGurk spoke about a revitalized Palestinian Authority. The team in place is really the team that has to be dealt with. We had rather hoped that Riyad al-Malki would come to this dialogue and speak. As far as I understand, his freedom of movement was denied by Israel. So moreover, Israel says that it must re-securitize the Gaza after this conflict. If Israel won't allow the Palestinian Authority to speak in public and disregards what President Biden said about what happens next in Gaza, when is the time to start applying sanctions on Israel?
Tom, thank you very much. Can I please turn to Shafi Al-Damar from Saudi Arabia?
Thank you, Bastian. According to the Realist School of International Relations, we are living in a world of anarchy. The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. In fact, Israel today is putting the famous philosophy of Nicola Machiavelli in practice, ruthless approach to achieving their objective. My question thank you, Joseph, for the statement today and yesterday, but also my question to you and to your American or US colleague, when are we going to see a real and strong pressure from Europe and perhaps from United States of America on Israel to adhere to international law, including the protection of civilians? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take a few more and then we'll return to the panel. Vivian Neraim from the US. Microphone's on.
Thank you. My question is for Brett McGurk. Is the U.S. still keen on pursuing further normalization agreements between Israel and Arab states? And if so, are you at all concerned about the swell of popular opposition to normalization across the region, including here in Bahrain, where many people are calling not only to stop further normalization, but to cancel the existing normalization agreement and roll back the Abraham Accords?
Thank you very much. And from the Republic of Korea, Chung-Min Lee.
Thank you, Bastian. My question is to Minister Safadi and Deputy Minister El-Khawaji. I understand the humanitarian concerns that everybody in this room has over the Palestinians, but you did not mention a single word, Minister Safadi, on why Iran continues to support the most vicious terrorist group in the world, Hamas, Hezbollah, and even the Houthis. What has your country done, or including Saudi Arabia and other GCC states, to stem, mitigate, and deter Iran's support of these vicious groups? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take two more. Ebtesam Al-Kebbi from the UAE.
Thank you. I join the others because the United States is a superpower. So my question for Brett McGurk, for sure, the war in Gaza was a strategic shock. But why? Because it brought United States back to the Middle East, but in a heavy militarization, which also the Chinese pointed to that, which did not happen in Iraq, in Libya. So this heavy military in the region, is it really for Hamas? Is it beyond Hamas? Or is it to compete with China and Russia? Russia and Iran was the losers from normalization, from IMEC, and those losers, of course, they will retaliate by supporting Hamas or trigger this kind of war. And this war also will trigger more jihadists are coming, this time not for Afghanistan. Even if you finish Gaza, there is jihadists for Gaza. The second question, what scenario for Gaza you are putting if this war is going to continue? And what if Palestinians, they are not accepting PA and Abbas? What you are going to do? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the final intervention from Robert Ward, please.
Thank you, Bastian. Brett McGurk referenced the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor agreed at the September G20 between the region's most important economic powers, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, as well as the EU and India. It's planned to traverse the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Israel, and in President Biden's word, it's designed to contribute to a more stable and prosperous Middle East. Given the increased geopolitical tensions in the region and the difficulties of diplomatic regional coordination now, does the panel feel that the corridor has a viable future?
Thank you very much. So we will take 10-12 minutes from the coffee break to just get responses to those 10 interventions from the floor. Thank you very much for those. We'll go in reverse order, and if I can ask panelists to be selective on the questions that you've been asked, engage with those so that we can wrap up in about 10 minutes from now. High Representative, if I can ask you to perhaps respond to the points that have been put to you.
Well, I've been the last questions addressed to me. But it's clear that, the European Union represents 27 different states. You know that at the United Nations we voted in 3 different ways. Someone supporting the Arab proposition, others opposing, another abstaining, which shows that there is a wide range of sensitivity. We are united, all of us, on the rejection of the terrorist attack against Israel, and on asking Israel to not being driven with rage on the answer. I am not a lawyer, I cannot say if there is a break of international law or not, but I think that to deprive a civil population of the basic services of water, food, medicines, everything, is something that it looks like being against international law. And looking at what the one who knows about it, who is the special envoy of the United Nations for this issue, he considered several times that the high level of civilian casualties and the wide scale of destruction of civilian infrastructure raises serious concerns about the proportion of the attacks of Israel trying to defend against Hamas. And this will be, even the International Criminal Court has been sending opinions about it. Investigation will go. It's not to me to define which is exactly the legal qualification of these events, but it's obvious that it raises serious concerns about the way Israel is performing their right to defend. And once again, what we have already saying from Europe and also from the US, that the best friend of Israel is the one who tell them not to be driven by rage and understand that the answer to this awful terrorist attack they have been suffering will determine also the next steps on the peace process. And about the hostages, it's obviously that the hostages has to be delivered. It's almost not necessary to say that, but yes, let's say once and again. I had spent 4 hours with the families of the hostages. So it's quite understandable that without the freedom of the hostages, nothing can be solved.
Thank you very much. Brett, you had a whole range of questions. If you can take maybe 3 minutes to give us a response.
Mina's question on the pause, which I think I got 2 questions. That was, yeah, we support humanitarian pauses. In fact, that resolution is something we worked on in a very painstaking way in New York. We did not vote for it because it doesn't not even condemn Hamas. And to vote for a resolution, I think it's a principle of ours, at the very least, condemn Hamas. What you just said is very important, release the hostages. Not everybody says that, release the hostages. But that gets to the pathway to a multi-day pause, where we are right now, is release the hostages, the mothers, the children, the toddlers and babies. And that's a very active discussion. Hamas and ISIS, we have drawn the comparison in terms of tactics. I drew the comparison here in terms of if you come here every year for 10 years. 10 years ago, we were talking about ISIS. I think we did galvanize an international coalition and a collective effort. Hamas is a different problem, clearly. But I do think this moment in this crisis, and I'm not talking about the security phase, I'm talking about what comes next. We need to be focused now, and we are, and I think it's very important for what comes next so we can ensure this can't happen again. Questions about Iran and how we balance escalation versus deterrence, everything else we're doing. I'm not going to reveal everything here. It is an equation that is inexact. It is something we look at every single day. We are prepared here for all possible contingencies. And the question I got about the military deployments to this region, they seem, when you're talking about Hamas, but it's not just Hamas. We did not deploy carrier strike groups because of Hamas. We deployed carrier strike groups because of the threats coming from Iran and many of its proxy groups. And in fact, we had a cruiser-destroyer in the Red Sea, not by happenstance, but when the Houthis launched multiple, almost 30 ballistic missiles and UAVs, we believe, at Israel, all of which our cruiser-destroyers shot down. That is why we deployed our military assets here, and it was the right move, and they're going to stay here as we work our way out of this crisis. Normalization, I think I spoke to it. Look, we are in the middle of a major crisis. This is our priority focus. It has been for the last 5 weeks. It will continue to be. But that broader agenda of integration, I have been in every capital in this region. I was just in Ramallah. I was just in Israel. I was in Saudi Arabia, UAE. I'm here in Manama. I'll be in Doha tonight. I'll be in Cairo tomorrow. I'll be in Amman tomorrow. That broader agenda of where we want to head, ultimately, is an affirmative agenda that is broadly shared. But clearly, we have to focus now in the here and now and getting out of the crisis, but very much so, that affirmative agenda. We cannot allow what Hamas did on October 7th to knock that permanently off path, and we're determined not to let that happen.
Right, thank you very much. Deputy Foreign Minister, if I can ask you to perhaps pick up also on the point with regards to Iran, but also there was a question about the economic corridor and any other issue you would like to pick up on.
Thank you. Concerning Iran, I think the strategy of Saudi Arabia for a stable region was very obvious. So later on, we restore our relation with the Iranian, and I think this would send a good sign to mitigate Iranian influence in somewhere in the region and have more stable region for the whole. Concerning the economical corridor, I think this idea was initiated soon, so we will have to give a chance, to see the outcome of it. We in Saudi Arabia think that we should not mix politics with economy. Economy is an economy, and things that are viable and vital for us, we will continue to work on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Safadi, please.
Thank you so much. Allow me first to say a couple of words on the issue of hostages. I think it's been very, very clear from day number one that we all have urged the release of civilians. The Arab League meeting, ministerial meeting, which took place within days from the October 7, we all urged the release of civilians. So that is a standard, that's a solid position, and we all know that a lot of work is being done to do that. But I just don't find it acceptable that Israel links a humanitarian pause to the release of hostages. The release of hostages, again, we all support it. There's a lot of negotiations. But Israel is taking 2.3 million Palestinians hostage in the process by denying them food and water and by this war. So yes to the release of hostages, but no to linking humanitarian pauses to the release of hostages, because the impact of that, the consequences of that, is starving 2.3 million Palestinians. Yesterday, the day before, at the Foreign Ministry in Jordan, we were getting calls from all over, including from someone called Dr. Nahad Saba, a Gazan Christian, pleading with us that his mother and 400 other people are being held hostage at a Latin monastery in Gaza. He's saying they don't have water, they don't have food, and he was asking if we could take them to our hospital, which is 4 kilometers away, which we said we'd gladly do, but we have no means because Israelis are shooting at everybody who's moving. So I think that's a reality that we need to understand. Our own hospital came under attack. 7 of our people who've been, our hospital has been in Gaza since 2009. 7 of our military medical staff were wounded. We did not have a Hamas tunnel under our hospital, nor does the Latin monastery in Gaza that has a Hamas tunnel. So we gotta be, quite honest about how things are evolving in Gaza there. We've seen what happened at Al-Shifa. How many people, how many babies were off the incubators because of the siege, and the whole of Gaza is besieged. Let me just say also to our colleague from Korea, be careful with sort of characterizations that are not anchored in reality. I mean, it's so easy to speak in black and white and throw characterizations. No, you cannot compare Hamas to ISIS. We all condemn the killing on October 7. But those broader characterizations seem to ignore the fact that Hamas did not create the conflict. The conflict created Hamas. Why is Hamas there? Because there continues to be an occupation that's denying Palestinian people their right. We in Jordan and all of us in the Arab world have always said negotiations are the path to peace. None of us endorse violence. But reality is negotiations have not produced peace. And Israel continues to occupy Palestinian territories and continues to consolidate Palestinian territories. Mr. Magek and I were in the same room when we had the Aqaba Sharm meetings. We had small steps that we agreed on. Steps that would just release some funds for the Palestinians to be able to put food on the table, among some other measures that would have created some calm. Israel signed this document in Aqaba. A month later, it implemented nothing. We met in Sharm el-Sheikh. we again reiterated the need for those measures to be implemented. Israel did not implement. Israeli politicians are saying they want to suffocate the Palestinian people's aspirations for statehood. So let's look at the broader sort of environment. Again, what we did in Jordan, we've been doing a lot for decades. We've signed a peace treaty with Israel 30 years ago almost. And that peace treaty was signed within the context of a collective Arab approach after Oslo Accords were signed to get to a comprehensive regional peace. People forget that Oslo Accords were signed as a transitional period for 4 to 5 years, after which a Palestinian state should have emerged. Israel did not honor that. Meanwhile, I think as Joseph said, number of settlements have increased by 400% on the West Bank. So again, let's put things in context. This conflict did not begin on October 7. This conflict will continue to haunt the region unless the root cause of this conflict, which is occupation, ends. And we all have been working together. The US has been supporting the two-state solution. Europe has been supporting the two-state solution. All of us in the Arab world have been supporting the two-state solution. Why don't we have a two-state solution? Because Israel does not want to have a two-state solution. And if it's not a two-state solution, then what it is? It is continued conflict. It is a reality of apartheid, because a one-state reality will not solve the conflict, and we'll find ourselves here and there in the same spot. So I'm telling you that what Jordan wants is a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace that will give the Palestinians their rights and that will ensure the security of Israelis. We're not taking side on who has the right to peace or not. Everybody has a right to peace. Palestinians have a right to peace. Israelis have a right to peace. But let's be honest about it. Israel will not have security until Palestinians have security. The whole region will not have security until this conflict is solved. What we're working for, what we've been working for, is to create conditions that would take us towards that peace, that will make sure every Palestinian, Israeli live in peace. That is what I've been working for, and that's what we've been trying to do. And I think the only way we can move forward and make sure this doesn't happen again is to go back to the drawing board and say, why are we here? And the answer is simple: occupation that has no prospects of ending, and then work together to end that so that Palestinians and Israelis share the land, and as His Majesty said not too long ago, so that there's peace and two states between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean. Without that, let's not fool ourselves. We're going to be in this over and over and over again. And just one point, if I may, last point on Gaza. Again, Israel is creating an ugly reality in Gaza. We cannot just wait until it's done with creating that reality and then come and say, let's fix it. I think what we need to do is to come in now and very strongly and stop Israel from creating the misery that Gaza is definitely is actually, and the worst misery that's going to be when the war stops. So what we're saying, the priority now must be on stopping the war if we are going to know what we're dealing with. But just like allowing somebody to come here with a torch and torching the whole place, and we're all watching, and once they're done, we'll say, thank you so much, now let's put the fire out. That's not how we're going to work.
Minister, thank you very much. That does bring us to our conclusion. We have to stop here. That brings us to the end of our first plenary session on war, diplomacy, and de-escalation. Before I ask you to thank our speakers just one more time, we'll have a short coffee break now. The next session will start here in the ballroom at 11 a.m. So please be back here in that room. And now, if I may ask you again for one more round of applause for our speakers who looked at current efforts to help stabilize the region. Thank you very much.
know whether we've got a video to play to get you all call to action. So I'm going to ask a nice video because one or two of our panelists here haven't yet seen it. So go ahead. It'll 33 seconds, and it gives everybody a chance to find their seats and take it. Well, thank you very much. Let me invite you to the second plenary session of this year's Manama Dialogue on the theme Navigating Global Competition. That was a theme that we put on the agenda when the overarching subject of the Manama Dialogue was intended to be the risks and opportunities of strategic diversification. And we identified that as an important subject because many of the countries of the region, including in the GCC, were experimenting with a wider variety of economic, diplomatic, and strategic partners after long periods of engaging, perhaps principally with European and North American states. There was a much stronger impulse to improve economic cooperation, strengthen trade, establish more intense diplomacy, and even develop security arrangements with countries of the East, Japan, China, ASEAN, Australia, others. Some of the countries in this region were also wanting to pay much greater attention to Africa, especially given rising challenges in the Sahel of counterterrorism, to which we've also returned, a tragedy that is taking place also to the south of Europe that affects European countries. Sometimes if you don't navigate global competition well, all you're ending up doing is managing a great deal of migration internationally of people needing to seek safety and asylum. And so all these debates have become part again of the domestic politics of European states. We have a fantastic panel here. I'm delighted, of course, that the first speaker in a moment in this panel will be Dr. Abdulatif bin Rashid Al Zayani, the Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain and our principal partner in supporting this Manama Dialogue. An old personal friend of mine, and of course the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Anwar Gargash, who had a long career as Minister of State in the United Arab Emirates and is now the diplomatic advisor to the President, Mohammed bin Zayed, in the UAE, and Dr. Tobias Lindner, Minister of State of the Federal Foreign Office in Germany. A delight always to have Germany here because the IISS is now a resident power in Germany with our office in Paris-sur-Platz, which gives us access within about 2 or 3 minutes both to the Bundestag and to the Chancellor's office, so we have many useful conversations there. So with that series of prefatory remarks that have settled the room, could I invite Dr. Abdulatif bin Rashid Al Zayani to make his remarks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sir John. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Your Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you to this year's Manama Dialogue, when in these most difficult of regional and international circumstances, we reaffirm the practical value and importance of engaging in sincere and meaningful dialogue. By doing so, we are actively seeking solutions to all the issues and challenges that lie before us, to create opportunities for genuine peace, stability, and prosperity in the days and years ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, the focus of our session is navigating global competition. As regions and the Gulf and Middle East have endured a long and often troubled history, filled with negative repercussions of such competition. Over centuries, nations both within and beyond the Middle East have competed for land, resources, and influence, using the full range of political, diplomatic, economic, and military means. Consequently, the region and its peoples have endured endless conflicts, instability, and unimaginable human suffering, thereby depriving them of the opportunity to fully realize their potential. Today, this competition persists, and if anything, it has grown even more complex, more dynamic, and more pervasive than ever before. Indeed, it may be hardwired into our human psyche, such that it is a core instinct to engage in competition with others. The question is how to channel this competition in a constructive manner that fuels innovation, growth, and progress. How can we ensure that we do not lag behind, while also ensuring that we don't leave others behind? How can we strike a balance between our national interests and our global responsibilities? How can we foster a more inclusive, resilient, and peaceful world? And in the broader international context, we must also ask how, as individual nations and societies, we can steer competition among both regional and global actors towards cooperation rather than conflict. It is vital that we recognize the immense value and potential that lies in fostering collaborative efforts as opposed to perpetuating a destructive cycle of antagonism. I believe there are two fundamental preconditions necessary to achieve this objective. Firstly, we need a framework of shared principles and values that can guide the actions of all parties involved. The Kingdom of Bahrain has always believed in the importance of mutual respect, dialogue, and tolerance. These values are crucial in navigating global competition and creating peace, stability, and prosperity, not only in our region, but also beyond. They not only help us maintain good relations with our neighbors and partners, but also shape our constructive engagement with the wider international community. Based on these core values, we establish principles like respect for national sovereignty, non-interference in the internal affairs, and adherence to international law and the United Nations Charter. These values and principles serve as a compass for nations, guiding us through the ever-changing landscape of global competition. Within or with new actors, alliances, and dynamics emerging every day, they provide a stable reference point in times of unprecedented change. From the rise of emerging economies to the rapid spread of digital technologies and the challenges of globalization and resilience of supply, these values and principles help us navigate such challenges and find common ground. If we can promote and advocate for these values and principles on a global scale, demonstrating their importance to all states, societies, and peoples, I believe that we can redirect competition in a positive direction in our region and beyond. By doing so, we will show the international relations are not a zero-sum game, but an opportunity for cooperation and collaboration, leading to mutual benefits and shared solutions. Secondly, to successfully navigate global competition, it is crucial to have a compelling long-term vision for our region and a clear understanding of the core elements needed for a more peaceful, stable, and prosperous future. While the challenges in the Middle East are deep-rooted and complex, it is possible to identify key themes and issues that must be addressed to deliver a better future. One of the most important issues is finding a lasting resolution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The horrors of this conflict continue to unfold before our eyes. And His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince and Prime Minister, highlighted the dire situation in Gaza in his keynote speech last night, during which he condemned both Hamas and Israel for their parts in it, which have led to the death of too many innocent civilians. For us to put an end to this latest escalation, we must, as His Royal Highness stressed, achieve a break in hostilities and allow the provision of urgent humanitarian aid and basic services, and release innocent civilians being held hostage. And we must all work together to end this war. His Royal Highness also outlined the way for us going forward, which stated clearly that a resolution requires a two-state solution that recognizes and fulfills the aspirations of the Palestinian people for a viable, secure, and independent state where they can pursue their social and economic development. It involves also acknowledging and ensuring Israel's security concerns, as without this, the region will remain on the brink of conflict and instability. In this context, we call for an international peace conference, as the Joint Arab and Islamic Summit called for, and the effective leadership of the United States, under the effective leadership of the United States, which will be crucial in this regard, through which we can initiate a credible peace process that could lead to such an outcome. If we do not adhere to diplomacy and dialogue and allow the continued violation of international law, and for countries to resort to the use of military force, the erosion of the rules-based global order will continue, and we risk the spread of further violence and instability across the world. Additionally, it is crucial to address the presence of non-state actors across the region. These groups contribute to instability, sectarianism, and tension. Disarming them and reducing their influence will promote the rule of law, strengthen state institutions, and foster inclusive governance, creating a more stable and secure environment for all. Lastly, building interdependence between regional states is vital for a stable and secure Middle East. By promoting economic integration, joint ventures, trade, and cross-border collaborations, the peoples of the region can benefit from shared resources, expertise, and opportunities. This interdependence will contribute to the overall prosperity of the region, promoting peaceful coexistence, discouraging conflict, and addressing socio-economic disparities. The Kingdom of Bahrain has consistently worked to implement all these themes, values, and ideas through its diplomatic and foreign policy, regionally in the context of GCC integration, and also at the international level, as demonstrated most recently by the signing of the Bahrain-US Comprehensive Security Integration and Prosperity Agreement, CCPA. Dear colleagues and friends, although there is no simple or easy answer to how best to navigate the issues raised by global competition, I firmly believe that the principles I have outlined can serve as a blueprint for nations as they seek to address and overcome these challenges and to seize the opportunities that arise. Further, these principles can also steer our collective endeavors as a global community towards resolving the conflicts that plague our world. We must therefore embrace and act upon these themes so that we can forge a brighter future for all, and in particular for those young individuals within our region, especially the Palestinians, who yearn for a beacon of hope to extinguish the flames of anger and vengeance ignited by wars. Together, through our shared efforts as an international community, I am certain that we can do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdulatif. And I think many people will have noted your epigrammatic remark that Gulf countries need to ensure that they do not lag behind while we do not leave others behind, which I think was an important statement of strategic empathy. You also mentioned a call for an international peace conference on the current problem in the Middle East, and I'm sure now and later today we will find out whether there is full international consensus to have an international peace conference as the best instrument to bring this conflict to an end and a better future for all. With that, could I ask Anwar Gargash to take the floor? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to say that I'm very grateful for being invited and being here in the Kingdom of Bahrain, and also to be here in the IISS 19th dialogue. It's really extraordinary to have your 19th and soon to celebrate our 20th dialogue. I also want to say that I am looking forward to our discussion following these prepared remarks, but it's precursory that we give these prepared remarks. So I want to just start by saying that we, through this dialogue, this forum offers us an important platform to share our perspectives on regional and global security dynamics. I believe conversations like these are very valuable, particularly at such a critical juncture in our region in light of the current war in Gaza with unprecedented violence and carnage. This has caused a serious humanitarian crisis and calls into question aspirations for stability in our region and brings new strategic challenges to the global stage. While perhaps it is too early to know how this crisis will impact the trajectory of regional and international relations, it is important to acknowledge that it will have strong ramifications for years to come. The unfolding situation in Gaza raises questions about the future of the international system, about the protection of international norms, about our values, and about whether our usual approaches for problem solving are working. Some of these approaches clearly require serious examination. For example, the policy of containment, which has characterized the Palestinian issue for so long, has clearly failed. As the events of the past month have shown, it would be a costly mistake to fail to re-engage politically on a peace process framework to achieve a two-state solution. Borders, refugees, East Jerusalem have to be sorted out. Containment has failed. This outcome will bring a promise of lasting peace. We hope will bring a promise of lasting peace to the Palestinian and Israeli people, and will require strong and sustained international engagement. I'd like to spend a few moments on the topic of our session, which is navigating global competition. In my last remarks here at the Manama Dialogue in 2019, I spoke about how we were about to enter the 2020s with a global order that was very fluid, a global order that seemed to lack a clear direction, a global order where the potential for increased competition among major powers was growing, including in the Middle East. Just a few months later, COVID-19 pandemic spread around the world, adding an extra layer of uncertainty to the global strategic context and shaking the global economy. The war in Ukraine also adds to the geopolitical uncertainty, with its knock-on effects on the entire global economy, food and energy security. It's led to greater divisions between the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, making consensus even more difficult to reach on key issues related to peace and security in the world. Similarly, the initial deadlock in the UN Security Council over the strategic situation in Gaza, which lasted for several weeks, despite an emerging consensus in the UN General Assembly about what needed to happen next, reflects this fragmented international landscape. These shifts have significant repercussions on international relations and point to what could become a larger crisis of the international order if we do not take steps to correct this course. They are also compounded by broader systemic trends, such as climate change, the nature of our very interconnected modern world, and the political, economic, and security effects of competition in the world, in the technological sphere. The way we navigate these trends will shape our future. Now, I'd like to underscore a couple of important points with respect to the shifting dynamics in global politics and the Middle East. The Middle East is very familiar with geopolitical competition playing out in its regional order. In fact, one of the key challenges we confront is the shifting dynamics of global politics. We understand only too well that a more turbulent international order will inevitably cascade down to affect our region. This is something we have to deal with, whether it is concerns about how the geopolitical competition between major powers unfolds in the Middle East, a competition we do not wish to be defined by, or questions about how the international system will look like the day after the wars in Ukraine and the Gaza Strip, and the sort of various yardstick that has been used in the two conflicts happening at the same time. Transition to an increasingly divided international system is not in anyone's interest, nor is increased uncertainty across the Middle East, a region that has recently experienced its most difficult decade with the so-called Arab Spring, and where the risk of escalation and rise in power vacuums is a consistent threat. This leads me to another point I wanted to make, which is that at this uncertain time in global and regional affairs, and in a world marked by rapid changes and increasing competition, it is imperative that the Middle East continue to carefully chart a course to ensure stability, prosperity, and peace for our nation. We've seen some promising signs in the last few years, as Middle Eastern states have been working together to find solutions to de-escalate conflicts, rebuild relations, focus on common goals. And despite this progress being uneven, we had renewed hopes that the Middle East will be charting a new path for the years to come. The war in Gaza represents a serious setback, no doubt about it, to de-escalation efforts in the wider region. The longer it lasts, the higher the risks are that the war will spread regionally, and that the current violence will only breed more violence and fuel greater radicalization in the region. I wonder sometimes if this is another Iraq moment, to be honest. We must prevent narratives of division from taking hold in the region and confront extremism in all its forms. While we continue to work hard towards a cessation of hostilities, the immediate priority is to achieve sustained and unrestricted humanitarian access to Gaza and substantial relief to alleviate the suffering of civilians in Gaza. In response to this acute need, the UAE has significantly stepped up our humanitarian efforts to support the people of Gaza, not just by increasing our financial commitments, but also by working in solidarity with medical teams in Gaza to set up an emergency field hospital there, and by taking children from Gaza to the UAE for medical treatment. Last night we saw images of the first 90 injured children being airlifted to Abu Dhabi, and this is part of our commitment to take 1,000 of the injured children in Gaza with their families in order to be treated in Abu Dhabi. This is, of course, a drop in the ocean of what Gaza needs in terms of the images that we see of the carnage and the human suffering. But we have to all work together in order to make the humanitarian effort significant and sustainable. The last point I would like to make is that now is also the time to look to the future and ask some deep, probing questions. Can we maintain a forward-looking momentum despite regional crises? And in light of the war in Gaza and its implications, can we work together to find lasting solutions to de-escalate the current tensions in the Middle East? I believe the answer to these questions is we must resolutely continue on a path to defend regional stability, and that requires that we need to go beyond containment. As we address the current crisis in Gaza, we need to continue efforts to repair the region, including by advancing our national plans to ensure progress and through collaborative efforts with global and regional partners to develop long-term strategies for the region. The need for reliable partners in the region is key. This requires a process of problem solving rather than containment, because crucially, there are issues in the region that need sustainable solutions. The lack of an enduring solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, but also other ongoing crises, socioeconomic disparities, and the aspirations for peace and prosperity of young people across the region. While some of these issues still seem out of reach, they must be addressed to bring greater stability to the Middle East. Let me conclude by reiterating the UAE's commitment to the security and stability of our region, as well as our resolve to continue working with friends and partners on an agenda of shared prosperity in the region. In doing so, we will continue to prioritize de-escalation, partnerships, diplomacy, and our enhanced focus on geoeconomics, because economic resilience is fundamental to the well-being of our nations and to the goals of achieving a shared stability that benefits us all. If we can successfully pursue these goals through inclusive, cooperative approaches with regional and international partners, I believe that we can improve regional security and lay the groundwork for a more prosperous and peaceful Middle East in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anwar. On the current conflict, we all take note of 3 points. 1, containment has failed. 2, it's important to confront the narratives of division. And 3rd, if I got it right, and I think it's important, that strategic initiatives for the region must come in greater measure from the region, which I think has been an important characteristic of UAE diplomacy recently. And finally, your concluding emphasis on geoeconomics, something on which the IISS is working ever more strongly with this region. By the way, I should advertise that the IISS has published recently an excellent study on Gulf bailout diplomacy, which is one of the best assessments of the way in which Gulf countries has engaged geoeconomically with countries of need in the region and beyond. And with that, Tobias, could you please take the podium? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, esteemed colleagues. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to lay out some thoughts from the German perspective on how to best navigate global affairs in our time of turmoil. I was asked to talk about global competition. Usually, I would now go on and talk about China and the US, global systemic competition. You all know these issues. But honestly, I feel that given the unbearable current situation in Israel and Palestine, I would rather focus on what we are facing in the world in terms of aggression and terror. From a Berlin perspective, we are facing multiple serious challenges. I very well remember how last year during this established conference, Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine was in all of our minds. It has shaken the European peace order to its very foundations. It is shocking to think that today this war goes on for 633 days. 633 days of innocent people dying, of livelihoods senselessly destroyed by the Russian aggressor. From a distance, and the longer the war is dragging on, this may seem like a European or purely Western problem. But as all of you in this room are well aware, it's not. It has directly affected the food supply in large parts of the world, as Russia is cynically using the issue of Ukrainian grain exports for its ends. And it directly touches upon the question on how we can live together in this world peacefully and with equal opportunities for all humankind. And with the events unfolding since October the 7th in Israel and Gaza, reason and humanity of the global community are being tested yet again. The horrifying images and reports of Hamas' barbaric, dehumanizing attack against mainly Jewish, but also Christian and Arab civilians, against babies, pregnant women, sick and elderly, I think they have shaken us all to the core. Families in Israel are crying for their loved ones brutally murdered or abducted by Hamas. And at the same time, we witness Palestinian parents pulling out their children from the wreckage of buildings, a civilian population in the midst of a battle zone facing a humanitarian disaster of catastrophic dimensions. We hear the cry of agony across the Middle East. We sympathize with the many civilian victims on both sides of the conflict. How could we not? As the world's second largest bilateral humanitarian donor, humanitarian assistance for all in need is an imperative for us everywhere. We have, again, increased our contributions to the Palestine territories and also to UNRWA, whose important work we have been supporting for years as top donor and defended against unfair criticism. And we mourn the death of more than 100 UNRWA colleagues after October the 7th. My minister, as you are all aware, is constantly traveling to the region, and my government has dispatched a special humanitarian envoy who consistently shuttles the region, negotiating humanitarian access and working towards assistance, reaching those most in need. And we have also joined all those trying to find a political solution to interrupt the immediate bloodshed. As you are all aware, my country bears historic responsibility for the Shoah. Israel's existence is for us non-negotiable. Israel, like any other state in the world, has the right to defend itself against terrorism within the boundaries of international law. Addressing the suffering of the Palestinians is in no way contradicts this clear and unwavering stance. It is a key part of it. The task is to fight Hamas, not the Palestinian civilian population. And this is a distinction of utmost importance. Hamas is using Palestinian civilians and the hostages as human shields, deliberately hiding below schools and hospitals. They not only tolerate the ensuing suffering, they intentionally provoke it as it creates breeding ground for hate, revenge, and new terrorism, and feeds its nihilistic ideology. It is not easy to thwart this perfidious strategy by Hamas, whose playbook is not only to bring death and destruction upon the region. Hamas also aims to use its terror to drive a wedge between the Arab states and the West, between the global South and the global North. We need to stand up to this divisive strategy, as it will only make things worse for the Palestinians, for Israel, for all in the region and beyond. That's why it's good to be here today with you at this distinguished dialogue. We need to intensively talk to each other and listen to each other in order to find common ground for a way forward. The essence we can all easily agree on is this: the human suffering in Gaza and Israel, and importantly also in the West Bank, must stop. We have a joint responsibility to continue making every effort to resolve the terrible dilemma on the ground. The prospect of humanitarian pauses is key to this, as the recently adopted important resolution of the Security Council re-emphasized. Far too many children and women have died already. The numbers are appalling and appealed to our shared humanity. People in Gaza urgently need humanitarian access and supply of basic necessities: water, food, medicines, to alleviate their suffering somewhat. Together with our partners, Germany is working tirelessly to find more ways and options to provide effective humanitarian assistance. Much more needs to be done to prevent a humanitarian collapse in Gaza from our side as well, but also Israel must show a much greater deal of flexibility. Even though a lasting solution to the Middle East conflict at this very moment might appear to be a distant prospect, even though the divisions in the world seem to have deepened, and even though we are almost totally immersed in acute crisis management, it is crucial not to lose sight of a longer-term future. The historic opportunity of peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors must not be destroyed, for that is precisely what terrorists want. Normalization efforts like the Abraham Accords break with the decade-long patterns of political behavior that led us nowhere and only prolonged human suffering on all sides. We need to break new grounds. Ladies and gentlemen, our efforts to bring about the release of hostages, to establish humanitarian access to Gaza, or to prevent the violence from spreading to the rest of the region only have a chance of success if we work together, especially with committed and willing Arab Gulf states. Only a renewed focus on the promise of a life side by side in two states can bring Israelis and Palestinians alive in peace, security, and dignity. This is what we all should focus on. Without close involvement and strong commitment of the Gulf states, a lasting solution to the conflict, which to us is a two-state solution, cannot be found. We acknowledge the important role that the Gulf states and the other member states of the Arab League are playing and the commitment they are showing in this regard. The recent joint Arab League and OIC summit in Riyadh was an important impulse for a coordinated process. In this context, Germany also acknowledged the Kingdom of Bahrain's and the United Arab Emirates' continued commitment to a good neighborhood and the Abraham Accords. And even though a lasting and peaceful solution to both wars in Ukraine and Gaza at this moment might appear a very distant prospect, even though the divisions in the world, as I said earlier, have deepened, and even though we are almost totally immersed in this acute crisis management, it is not crucial not to lose sight to the longer-term future. I thank you.
Tobias, thank you very much. And I think the early part of your remarks made me think that one of the challenges we have is maybe managing global cooperation on resolving the Israel-Hamas war. And secondly, I think you did underscore what our two friends on this panel hold idea, which is that the Abraham Accord arrangements are not and should not become an additional casualty of this conflict, but might indeed help strengthen efforts rapidly to revive the effort to establish a two-state solution. So with that, I'm pleased to say we've got a number of people who wish to take the floor. I'll take 9 or 10 and then return to the panel. Reem Momtaz, please.
Thank you, John. I have a question for Dr. Gargash and Dr. Al-Zayani. As two countries that normalize with Israel without imposing conditions related to the Palestinian issue, how responsible are you about what Dr. Al-Gargash said called the containment of the Palestinian issue? And he spoke about the need for problem solving right now. What are you two countries going to do concretely when it comes to the governance of Gaza after the end of this war? And to Dr. Lindner, just a simple question. Is Israel's current operation in Gaza in compliance with international law? Thank you.
Thank you. And from the UAE, Khalifa Al-Suwaidi. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi. My question is for Anwar Gargash, Dr. Anwar Gargash, Your Excellency. Just bear with me. My question relates to striking a healthy balance between competition and collaboration. Could you please shed light on the UAE's formula for navigating such a global order that is in a constant state of flux? Thank you very much.
And from Germany and CDU, Johan Wadefuhl.
Thank you, Sir John. Thank you very much. Since I'm a German, I would ask Tobias Lindner, because I have the opportunity to do it weekly in Berlin. But to the other two panelists, please. If I follow the conference rightly, I see a lot of support for a cessation of violence. If you call it a pause, a long-lasting pause, however, and I also see a lot of support, and I think we all agree that there shall be a two-state solution. But what has to happen in the time in between, after the cessation of using weapons? Do you see any opportunity that these countries here from the region, from the Gulf states, from the Arab League, that they take more responsibility, especially for the Gaza Strip in the forthcoming time? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And from the Netherlands and the IISS, Verlin Owens.
Thank you, Sir John. My question is to Dr. Gargash. There's been a lot of news this year of the growing ties between the UAE and China, including the first ever joint military drill involving your air forces in Falcon Shield 2023. My question is, do you think that a security partnership with China might be advantageous for the UAE as a hedging strategy, or is that not in the cards for the time being? Thank you.
And from the UK and also the IISS, John Rain.
Thank you, John. Dr. Gargash, where do events in Gaza leave the UAE's zero problems foreign policy?
Thank you. And Khalid Juma, Bahrain.
In recent weeks, and again earlier this morning, we've seen multiple world leaders and state representatives lament the inconsistent application of international law. How does this perceived unequal application of international law affect the behavior of non-state actors, and how does it affect our region's stability and the international rule-based order? Thank you.
Eman Raga from Egypt.
Thank you. My question is for Dr. Gargash. How do you see the future of the I2U2 bloc that has UAE, Israel, India, and the United States as members? And after the war in Gaza period, do you think that it will be open to other Arabian and Gulf countries to join as members? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We might have time for about 5 or 6 more before I need to close the session, but I might, since there are quite a lot of questions already, come back to the panel in the order in which I felt they had the most questions. So Anwar Gargash first, then Tobias, and then Abdul Latif. A couple of minutes each before we go back. Anwar.
I don't see the flow of questions as any competition popularity.
No.
I assure you. But I think number one is, I think we, again, the question was on the Abrahamic Accords, really. And I think the important thing is we need to do two things at the same time. I think number one is, as I said, we need to go beyond containment. And at the same time, we need to also understand that in many ways, the UAE, when it comes to the Palestinian issue, does not really run a foreign policy that is isolated really from our allies in the region, our sort of moderate core. We refer, for example, in the Gaza crisis now, to Egypt, to Jordan, and so on and so forth. What is important to them is also important to us. There's no doubt that the war in Gaza is a setback for moderation. There's no doubt about it. I have to come and say that it gives radicalization a platform, a podium. There's no doubt about it. But I think also in the longer term, it gives us a major issue here. That major indication is we need to really address a problem. We need to look at the borders. I mean, if you look historically, and I was reading recently a few books on the history of the crisis and some biographies, etc. Israel has always been averse at trying to define its borders. Even in 1956, for example, Ben Gurion was not completely happy about withdrawing completely from Sinai. So that aversion has to be addressed. We cannot have that sort of ambiguity about what constitutes an independent Palestinian state. We cannot, in many ways, not address these borders. We cannot accept a UN resolution and say a two-state solution, but at the same time find out that that two-state solution is permeated by settlements and so on and so forth, and is not ready there. I think some of the statements also that we hear now from the Israeli Prime Minister and indeed the Israeli President about the sort of longer-term Israeli connection to Gaza, they are very worrying, to be honest, because I think that this indicates that perhaps the lesson that we as the majority of people in the region are taking away from the Gaza crisis, which is the need to go back to a two-state solution. We need to go back to an Israeli and Palestinian state living side by side. That lesson is perhaps not being the same lesson that the Israeli far right or indeed the radical groups on the Arab side are actually taking out from the Gaza conflict. And that, I think, is the danger. The danger is we need to come back and keep our compass, all of us as responsible members of the international community, in the right direction. And the right direction is we need to resolve this, and we need to actually come and be very frank with the Israelis. What are the borders that you are accepting? What are these borders that you have tried, as I said, you've been averse to during partition in 1967 and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not trying to on the Abrahamic Accords thing. I think when we signed that agreement, and I was part of the team that was working on the agreement, we had a very clear concession from the Netanyahu government at the time, which was the issue of hold back on the annexation of Palestinian territories. And I think this was something that was quite, some people might make something lesser of the issue right now, but at that time, this was an acute threat, really, further reinforcing the same sort of land grab that has been part of the Palestinian issue. can I take a little bit more time because I have a couple of things?
I think the most important question is, Johan Wadefuls, on what happens in that in-between time. If one succeeds in stopping the conflict, one won't jump immediately into a two-state solution. So how is that in-between time managed?
Again, I mean, I have to, sometimes I think the questions are being asked of us in the UAE or indeed any other country. We are within an Arab consensus. We're not an independent solo player, politically or diplomatically. We are guided by, number one, the countries that are immediately, with borders with the Palestinian Authority, with Israel, Jordan, Egypt, etc. What they think is extremely important to us, what Saudi Arabia thinks is extremely important to us. And I think we are, in many ways, a supporting actor to that Arab consensus. Sometimes, of course, we have our initiatives, but I think it should be understood in that sort of framework. You don't have 22 Arab countries, all of them with 22 different policies towards the Palestinian issues. You have an Arab consensus, and people within that consensus have a certain margin of movement there. I think clearly right now there are clear priorities. Number one priority, as I said earlier, is the humanitarian. I mean, what is really arriving in Gaza is dismal. I mean, at the end of the day, to sustain this population that is being bombarded every day, the images that we see mostly on Arab TV and somehow are sanitized perhaps in some of the Western channels or some of the Western social media is abhorring. I mean, it really is tragic, it is inhumane, and this is the first thing that we need to do. We need this unfettered access for humanitarian support. I mean, I can't explain that after Hamas's, horrible attack really on civilians, that 5,000 women and 3,000 plus Palestinian kids were killed. I mean, I don't understand the rationale here between these events. So I think that is essential. I think the second thing is the longer the crisis takes, the more danger we have of a regional crisis spiraling out of control. And I think we have to be very, very careful about it. Then, of course, coming to your next question, and I've been, hearing different things. I think we need to be guided by the Palestinians. I mean, we can't really come and sit down and say the next step will be, some sort of a de facto administration over Gaza, or the PA should do this and that. I think we need to be guided by the Palestinians. If we are not guided by the Palestinians, whatever we do will just not be legitimate. And I think the issue of legitimacy is extremely important in the next step. So I think that is essential. I have a question on China and other things, but you want me to do the China one?
Yeah, do the China one.
I can do the China one. I think on China, again, if we know that there is no US vacuum in the region, if we know that there is a US commitment to its allies in the region, I don't think we are looking to hedge our long-term security, regional security plans with anything to do with China. I mean, you mentioned the exercise. These exercises are done, they are routine. We do exercises with various countries, whether they are naval or whether they are air exercises. I don't think they signal anything. I think people are reading too much from this. But I think ultimately, the sort of regional security architecture for the UAE and relevant to other countries in the Gulf, although I don't want to speak on everybody's behalf, will be determined really by how committed is our traditional ally of the past 30, 40 years for the next 30, 40 years? Will that sort of, unspoken, sort of unofficial commitment, can we turn that into concrete commitments that we can actually rely on? If these are the things that we can do, I really don't see that we are hedging there. I think the link that we have with China, or in fact with India and others, is more of a policy that wants to build bridges, more economic, more technological, with every part of the world. But I think if we are secure in our, secure in a U.S. commitment to the security of the region long term, I don't see why we should change what has proven quite efficient for us over the years. I mean, there are tweaks here and there, but I think this is where we are really.
Anwar, thank you very much. So 2 minutes to Tobias, and if Abdulatif, you have something, and then we come back to the audience. But Tobias?
Okay, I'm trying to be as quick as I can.
Yeah.
And so I think it's obvious that nothing justifies what happened on October the 7th. But if we want to really defeat terrorism in the region, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, all those groups, we need to have not only a plan for the day after the military operation in Gaza, as Johan Wadepoel asked, but we need to have a long-term perspective to the Palestinians. If they are losing, especially the young generation, their perspective, and Anwar Gargash is totally right on containment, or let's say a delay of the Palestinian issue. If we do not have that perspective, we will not be able to fight or to destroy Hamas just by military means. I think that's the important point, and I think that's the common ground we are all on, that a two-state solution is the only way for just and lasting peace in the region. And a quick comment on the issue of international humanitarian law. Imagine that if on my country more than 10,000 rockets would have been fired, for sure Germany would defend itself. And I believe every country in that room would say, if we would have been attacked, would defend ourselves. The international law, the Charter of the UN Charter is not a menu a la carte where you can do cherry picking. There is a right for self-defense. But at the same time, we have seen and recognized the resolution of the Security Council. And that resolution is very clear when it comes to humanitarian pauses, when it comes to the humanitarian situation. And that resolution is binding, to be also clear on that. And as I said in my speech, it requires more flexibility from Israel than we have seen to the present. Thank you.
Abdulatif?
Well, thank you, Sir John. I think right now, we're always, or all are saying, the day after. I think the day after is today. We should start working on the day after today. The earlier we can achieve it, the better it is. Let's not have it just a target in the future and just watch what is unfolding in front of our eyes. What does Palestine need? What do the Palestinians need? Right now, they want the basic right, the basic human right, their right to live, their right to stay alive. Can this be part of the next day, or should it be part of today? They need a cessation of hostilities. They need a sustained enough humanitarian supplies. Right now, today. They need medical aid. They need medical treatments. They need to ensure that they are not forced to be displaced. They need, we say hope. Definitely they do. Otherwise, many of those children or orphans who will grow up, I don't know what will they be having. They will have anger, and they will be thirsty for blood, for revenge. Is this what we want? I really like to ask the audience, is there anybody who doesn't believe in the two-state solution in the world? Is there anybody who doesn't believe in the two-state solution? We need to work collectively and comprehensively to achieve that objective. That's the strategic objective for resolving the long-standing conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But we need to work together. We need to use all tools available. And if we can increase those tools, let it be. Let's find ways of having more tools to get to that state where a two-state solution is acceptable. But that's what the Palestinians want. What do the region want? The region wants a safe, secure, developed region. We need to work also on it right from today. We called for international conference. International conference cannot be just one event in time with a document, communique, declaration, and then no implementation plan. I think it should be a full, rounded a conference, call it forum, call it effort, and should be continuous. There should be a sustained peace, a viable, independent, sovereign Palestine, secured also at the same time, and secured Israel. And also we look at the overall race. So
thanks, Abdul Latif. I'm going to bring a couple more in, and we'll get another shot. So coming back to the floor for about 3 or 4 more from Jordan, Ali Sharaf Nasser bin Nasser.
Yes, thank you to all the panelists. I think my question is to all of you is what chance does the Arab world and Europe stand to reach some kind of political settlement to this conflict in light of the current US and Israeli approach, which is increasingly seen through a prism of prism of security, which reminds me of the saying that when all you have left is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom Beckett.
Thank you, John. In a country not far from the occupied Palestinian territories, more than 300,000 civilians have been killed over the last decade. Half the population has been displaced, and 14 million people are in need of humanitarian support. That's Syria, al-Assad, supported by Russia. Was it wise, does the panel think it was wise to readmit Syria to the Arab League earlier this year?
And from Japan, Yuka Koshino.
Thank you, John. I think that I have a question to Dr. Gargash. You talked about the links of geopolitical competition and also geoeconomics and the stability in the region. And I think the UAE has been engaging with the Indo-Pacific or joining new institutions like BRICS. So could you elaborate on those expectations and perhaps the role of BRICS and the shared prosperity in the region, how to achieve a shared prosperity, how it contributes to the shared prosperity in the region that you mentioned? Thank you.
Cheyenne Talabmi from UK.
Thank you. My question is for Their Excellencies Dr. Al-Zayani and Dr. Gargash. Dr. Gargash, you referenced or you asked the question of whether this is a sort of Iraq moment. In light of the sort of unique position of your governments in the Abrahamic Accords, but also where you are situated in the region, how do you and how do your governments foresee or how are you foreseeing and adapting solutions to countering radicalization and extremism specifically, particularly in more volatile contexts in the region and with long-standing issues such as what Tom Beckett just referenced in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen. So just zooming out a little bit of the current conflict.
Thank you very much. Hassan Al-Hassan from Bahrain.
Thank you very much. My question is addressed to Doctors Gargash and Al-Zayani. Ambassador Yusuf Ateba, the UAE's ambassador in Washington, D.C., said several weeks ago, prior to the onset of the current conflict, he confessed that the Abraham Accords, in fact, failed to get Israel to live up to its commitment of suspending the expansion of settlements in the West Bank. Are the UAE and Bahrain willing to take incremental diplomatic steps, recalling ambassadors, lowering levels of representation, imposing trade investment sanctions, considering even potentially a suspension of diplomatic relations, to exert pressure on Israel to stop the carnage against Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank? Thank you.
And finally, from Egypt, Sadwa Ismat.
Thank you so much. I agree to His Excellency Dr. Zayani's statement that the day after is today. And I agree to Dr. Garga's statement that the longer the crisis, the longer the violence, and the longer the escalation. So my question comes, what's next? When an action can actually be taken? When the international words and the Security Council resolution is already taken, but it's not implemented. So whom we are expecting that will help putting an end to that war? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Brilliant. I think we should come back. We've got about 6 minutes before we need to close for lunch. Anwar Gargash, Abdul Latif Al-Zayani, and Tobias Sintner.
Connect the Syria issue with recalling ambassadors. I think this is connected. I think we have found through our sort of diplomatic process is that instant gratification is not the solution in politics. Communication is the solution in politics. So not at every major crisis, and Gaza is definitely a major crisis, we go to instant gratification. I think we maintain links, and I think this was, although it's a different context, of course, but this is one of the lessons of the Syria episode. And I was there in the Arab League many, many years ago, and I think we lost complete leverage, we lost complete communication with what happened with Syria, created a vacuum, and as a result, the Arab sort of role within the Syria crisis was really inconsequential for the next 8, 9, 10 years. So instant gratification is not always the solution. Again, the current leverage that we have is leverage that we are using as much as we can in humanitarian. But this leverage will also grow at some stage. So the answer to these things is sometimes in politics, you don't run things through your heart, you run them through your mind, to be honest, Difficult, but I think that's the way that things go, and that is the way that we need to manage that issue. That's really our conclusion. Vis-a-vis the BRICS question, I think there's been a lot of speculation on the UAE. Again, the issue of hedging. Is this another hedging process? No, it is not. I think the BRICS today for us is another set of communications and bridges with various countries, various forums. And, following the Arab Spring, following COVID, we have re-examined also what are the priorities of our foreign policy. And a major priority of our foreign policy is we need to have links all over. We need to be able to talk to everybody. We need to be able to use these relationships, whether for our own priorities or for regional priorities. So again, does that extend to the security sphere? As I said, if we are assured of the U.S. commitment moving forward, I don't think there is any reason for us to change course. Is it an Iraq moment? I don't know. I'm just worried that it is. I really don't know. I think it's too early, to be honest. But I think what is happening in the region, we have to be very careful. Today, the same voices that are critical of the UAE are critical of Jordan, are critical of Egypt, are critical of Saudi Arabia. This is really an onslaught within Arab public opinion and in some of the social media circle. It is really an onslaught on Arab moderation. We have to take charge. We should not allow the Palestinian issue on the Israeli side to be run by the extreme right. And we have seen where the extreme right has led this issue. And on our side also, this issue should not be run by militias and quasi-militias. We should take charge. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Jordan and other countries in the Arab League, we have to take charge. Because for us, there is a fundamental attack on the moderate stance of moderate Arab states. And moderate Arab states, together, we need to come out with solutions. We need to take charge. We need to be the initiators of what is going on right now. Because to be honest, what we are really seeing on the Arab sort of public opinion spectrum, it's the same onslaught really on Arab moderation, the Arab center. And the Arab center has to deliver on a two-state solution on the Palestinian issue. And the Arab moderate center has to be the one that actually stands up to extremism and radicalism, etc. But I think also we need US leadership on this issue. The US also role is extremely important. We need also for Europe to be sympathetic to the Palestinians. We understand the historical German sympathy with Israel, but we need more sympathy also with the plight of the Palestinians. This is essential in many ways. And at the same time, the Israelis also, if they are on a course of right-wing politics, such as the one we have seen over the last 15 years, is going to be disastrous. And I mean, we're seeing these crises every year or two. I mean, this is the largest in scale, but we have been in perpetual crisis mode, really, in Gaza and in the West Bank. And this is not sustainable.
Abdulatif, thank you.
Thank you, John. This time I'll be short. Regarding Syria, we've already said we need a collective, all the peoples of the region are to be involved in resolving and steering the future for the region. So we need everybody to be engaged, and we need a collective and comprehensive real approach to achieve the two-state solution. Syria's and the relationship with Syria is also important. The Abraham Accord, contrary, as I said, we need tools to be able to work with, to achieve our political objective that we will all determine based on if we can get the International Peace Conference with the leadership of the United States achieved. What is next? I think the most important now is really the cessation of hostilities and trying to save lives. And I believe that the Abu Mazen, the president, in his remarks during the Islamic Arab Summit said the next will be election, etc. So once the international conference is established, that will lay down the process forward. But as I said, it has to be pragmatic. It can be implemented this time, and really enough is enough. We have to solve it this time. It has to be solved.
Thank you very much. And Tobias.
Thank you so much, John. So 2 quick comments. First of all, on Syria, you know, Germany is not a member of the Arab League, so it was not our decision to readmit Syria. We just have to respect it, although I have a different position. But if we are honest, did we have seen any change of policy from Mr. Assad now? I doubt. So, you know, we are giving lots of humanitarian aid to the Syrian people because we have to take care about the people. But we are fully committed to a step-by-step approach, meaning that everything that goes beyond humanitarian aid needs some credible steps from Mr. Assad in a change of his policy. I do not expect him to become like the Prime Minister of Sweden or something like that. But what I do expect is, for instance, a release of political prisoners, for instance. On the region, one final remark, because Anwar Gargash touched on it. You know, our relationship as Germans to Israel can be good or bad, easy or complicated. It will be always special. But that speciality does not mean that we are not outspoken, for instance, when it comes to settlement policies in the West Bank or to settler violence. If we are all committed to a two-state solution, that also means that there shouldn't be some steps like settlement expansion that make a two-state solution impossible. That's one of my concerns. And I believe sitting here together in Manama, you know, we can spend the time for hours in finding out where we disagree or where we might have different positions, but that bring us not forward. That does not stop the civilian killings. So let's focus on those things we have in common, and that's a two-state solution, that's a humanitarian situation. And I very much understand that the Arab countries, that they need countries like mine to support your approach. At the same time, we need you, and you said the moderate positions. We need those moderate, pragmatic positions to come forward here in your region, and I can assure you, we are not one-sided. We care about the fate of the Palestinian people. We are the second largest humanitarian donor here in the region for decades. So we care about the Palestinians, and we look forward to working with you on a political perspective. I thank you.
Thank you very much. So I conclude with one answer and two questions. The answer I conclude with is that strategic hedging will not be needed if strategic trust with traditional partners is reinforced. And the two questions are, who takes charge in the region and through what diplomatic instrument to accelerate the path to a two-state solution? And the second question I'm left with is, does diplomatic inclusion result in improved strategic behavior? Maybe we'll get more answers to those two questions by Sunday noon, but now it's 12:25. We have 5 minutes to get to lunch. Please thank our speakers very kindly. Thank you very much.